Good morning. We're going to pick up our discussion of extinctions, and of necessity we'll be pretty much wandering all over the map. We're kind of focusing on the United States at this time, although Canada is really our natural partner in it, and we have a tendency to think of Canada as just this place where it's all about raw materials, and no, they're developing their yuppie class, and they're not in my backyard orientation like we have, particularly on the coast. And well, a good example of that is the fact that the reason that we are struggling with the Keystone pipeline is that the Canadians refuse to have it run through their area, and as a result, we're having to wrestle with that. So there are enough environmentally oriented there people too, and they really don't want their country totally destroyed in certain areas. And right now, the First Nation of the original Native Americans are really being injured by the whole oil sand development in Alberta, and the Canadians are starting to get in on the issue too, and of course they have a huge amount of lands that are involved in the whole conservation movement. And if you have essentially North America oriented towards this, it's a big change. Europe is well along on the environmental approach, and the more the merrier. It's a matter, as I mentioned before, of just having habitat, places where other creatures can survive, and it's a numbers game, just an area game. Just how much could we have that's not devoted to our industry, to our monoculture, and to our garbage. So we have to be opportunistic, do everything we can. Last time when we finished, I was being pretty just dismissive about the legal approach to this, which it seems to be our most prominent. Let me expand a little on that. The Endangered Species Act, when it came out with essentially bipartisan support, and we recognized that just a lot of species were disappearing, and the original bill was pretty straightforward and easy to execute, and the number of species that were declared to be endangered increased gradually. During the Bush administration, it pretty much plummeted, and we also had a provision in the amendments that the financial result of actions had to be considered, and this has ended up in the typical government situation that we have. It starts out with great intentions, and then it gets mired in process, and you have hearings and delays and coming back, and it's just interminable, and it's a very wasteful way to do business. From my standpoint, instead of looking at private property as an enemy, the environmental movement should embrace it as a friend. I have a few suggestions on that. One is just the approach that the Nature Conservancy is taking, which is just paying for property and keeping it protected. And that's the most straightforward thing. They've been criticized for doing deals by having a friendly relationship with areas of big business. This is really okay. If you can work something out, it doesn't matter who it comes from. You don't worry if it's a donation because of conscience or because of just publicity, public relations. If you can get any part of nature protected, you go ahead and do it. So that approach is great. Second approach is looking at our national parks, our federal preserves, and just really asserting that this is the property of the people of the United States. It's not the property of the people who have certain permission to go ahead and use the land. So we have situations where land is being used by private enterprise, and this is fine, but it is not necessarily their land. If there are situations where there is being used as well, this is the way we've been doing it, this should not be cut off suddenly, but with due warning if it can be better used in the preservation of species, that should be the priority. And the last area is something I'd like to introduce as a mechanism for preserving the forests, preserving the ecosystems with a type of corporation that is set up to allow good motives for corporations. This is just come up in the last few years, is legal in 11 different states, and the rate is growing. And this allows a corporation to be formed which has a benefit motive. In other words, it exists, it will make a profit. Okay, we're always thinking of non-profit institutions as carrying the big burden, but this type of corporation will earn a profit, and I would like to designate what I call the low profit benefit corporation as a situation which will allow the environmental movement to get into the areas like lumber farming and to actually produce something that's a useful product, and at the same time honor the environmental requirements and do two good things at once, and do it in a way that will continue for a long time and not require a constant infusion of money, fundraising, and over time really bulk up and do something very useful. See you next time.